Sir William Osler writes, "The good physician treats the disease. The great physician treats the patient who has the disease." This is Mark Holland, Archivist of the McKinley Presidential Library and Museum, and we as a museum want to show our support to the people in the medical world who are fighting COVID-19 and treating the patients as well as the disease. We want you to know the origins of our local medical personnel. We present to you Mercy Hospital, a gift of charity. Between 1904 and 1905, Charles F. Lang writes that his sister, Mrs. Rosa Lang Clorer, spoke with her friends about the need for a new hospital in Canton, Ohio. Both Charles and Rosa called on the Sisters of Charity of St. Augustine's Convent in Lakewood, Ohio, who promised to take charge of such an institution if one was operated in Canton. The McKinley property was chosen for the site of the new hospital. With the death of First Lady Ida Saxton McKinley, her house was eventually put up for sale. Rosa Clorer purchased the home and presented it to the Catholic Diocese of Cleveland. The Sisters of Charity were called on to fulfill their promise. The hospital was started in William and Ida McKinley's home on the southwest corner of North Market Avenue and Lewis Avenue. On October 8, 1908, the house was blessed by Right Reverend Monsignor G. F. Houck, and he named the institution Mercy Hospital in honor of the group of nuns that would become the Sisters of Charity. President McKinley's parlor became the records room, and Mrs. McKinley's suite was converted into a children's ward. In less than a year, the McKinley House proved to be inadequate space for a hospital. Rosa began the task of constructing the 1911 building of the hospital, and ground was broken on July 25, 1909. The Sisters of Charity took possession of the newly completed building on March 17, 1911. The new building faced north on Lewis Avenue, and the frontage was 97 feet 8 inches. Berger metal timber formed the partitions and floors of the building, and the columns and trimmings were hand-cut from Amherst stone. The building was 5 stories, including a basement with a kitchen, pantry, refrigerator room, and a special blower room that can circulate air throughout the entire building. The Sisters had an Otis push-button electric elevator installed that ran from the basement to the penthouse. The first floor contained a chapel, offices, diet kitchens, lavatory, 2 large bathrooms, and 3 large wards. The second floor had 16 private rooms, and the third floor had 18 rooms. The east half of the 4th floor contained the operating department. The west half of this floor was set aside for rooms for the sisters. At the time of the opening of the 1911 building, Dr. O. E. Portman was the chief of staff and consulting physician. Dr. George F. Zinniger was physician-in-chief at Mercy and would go on to serve as the president of the Mercy medical staff from 1922 to 1924. Dr. Zinniger had his private practice along with his family's residence at the corner of North Cleveland Avenue and present-day 3rd Street. The 1911 building would eventually become overcrowded, much like the McKinley House. An expansion became necessary. With the completion of the 1911 building, the McKinley House was once more converted, this time into what would become known as the Mercy Hospital School of Nursing, that had been established the same year as the hospital. By 1926, The question that was uppermost on Rosa Clorer's mind was, will this wonderful opportunity for service be allowed to expand? In 1927, Dr. and Mrs. H. M. Schaffel presented to the Sisters of Charity their home at 215 15th Street and Logan Avenue Northwest, with the stipulation that the house was to be used by the sisters for children. The Little Flower Hospital for Children was born. There were 25 beds with this new satellite building, and with the conversion of a garage in the back of the house, the Children's Hospital had a large ward for contagious diseases. A campaign was started to raise funds for the second building that would be connected to the first. Among the marketing for the fundraiser was a small 20-page pamphlet that contained statistics and photographs to raise the awareness of how congested the 1911 building had become and how there was a need for an expansion. On June 4, 1929, ground was broken for the second building to be built where the McKinley House sat on North Market Avenue. The crowds that attended the groundbreaking stood where delegates from all over the country stood during William McKinley's 1896 presidential campaign. In 3 months, the cornerstone was set in place and was planned for the new wing to open the following year on July 1, 1930. One obstacle that stood in the way of this plan was the McKinley House itself. It was cut into 4 pieces and moved to Meyer Park in the southwest end of Canton. The house was then reassembled on Park Avenue. The plan was to convert the former residence turned hospital into a shrine to President McKinley. The new building was completed, and a plaque commemorating how the McKinley House once stood where the new Mercy Hospital building now stands was attached to the building. We have that same plaque to President McKinley in our permanent collection at the museum. On August 1, 1938, Rosa Lang Clorer passed away in the hospital she had built, which had become her primary residence. She was laid to rest in the St. Peter's Cemetery yard on North Cleveland Avenue. During the Thanksgiving of 1947, Jim Fisher of Canton, Ohio, who had relocated to Detroit, Michigan, was flying in to Canton to have dinner with his mother. His 14-year-old brother-in-law, Patrick Ross, was with him. Jim fully intended on landing in Canton before dark, but ran into weather, and he was barely able to see any lights. He crashed into a gas well derrick, and his plane went straight down. Young Patrick was able to crawl out of the wreckage, but Jim was trapped. Patrick went for help, but he had difficulty finding the crash site in the storm. By 9 p.m. that night, Jim was wheeled into Mercy Hospital, where interns and 6 staff specialists treated his multiple injuries through x-rays, surgery, and casts. Jim reported that he will fly again. By the late 1940s, the Sisters of Charity were looking toward another expansion. This time they would go outside the downtown area to a piece of ground located on the northwest section of Canton, on 12th Street near Harrison Avenue. By the late 1940s, with the 1911 building and the Market Avenue building, the Sisters of Charity were looking to expand once more. In 1931, the hospital had served 4,433 patients, and in 1946, they had served 11,083. In 1931, there were 162 operations, and in 1946, there were 3,323. There were 554 maternity cases in 1931, and in 1946 there were 1,881, and the nursery was using 500 diapers a day. It was evident there was a clear need for expansion. A campaign was started to raise an estimated $2.2 million for the new buildings. In November of 1949, the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown purchased land in Canton at the corner of North Market Avenue and 28th Street for $30,000, and the plan was to build the new hospital at that location. On April 20th, 1950, the Sisters of Charity received their first big break. The Timken brothers, W. Robert, Henry H., and John, offered the H. Timken Mansion and 30.8 acres of land as a gift to the hospital. The appraised gift of $202,000 was accepted 4 days later. In addition to many other gifts to both Mercy and Altman hospitals, the Timken brothers, at their own expense, remodeled the lovely Timken Mansion into a hospital for 69 patients. They also added a medical library. The alterations began on August 1st, 1950. The mansion's indoor swimming pool became the chapel for the new branch of Mercy Hospital. The first unit of Timken Mercy Hospital opened its doors in February of 1952. Great thought and work was put into retaining the beauty of the Timken Mansion. Between 1952 and 1957, more than 20,000 patients had been cared for in this first section of the hospital. In January of 1957, a 3-day open house was held for people to view the latest addition to the hospital Rosa Klorer dreamed of so long ago. On July 11, 1979, ground was broken for yet another addition. Mercy Medical Center, as it is known today, has a rich and colorful history, but its story is far from over.